7 minutes at Ibrox stripped Graeme Murty naked, exposing his inexperience to the world and the reasons he could never be named the permanent manager of Rangers. With the score in the derby tied at 2-2 back in March, Celtic defender Jozo Simonovic was shown the red card. And Brendan Rodgers reacted instantly. Calling Scott Brown to the sidelines, the Parkhead manager twiddled his fingers with the dexterity of the late Ted Rogers, presenting an episode of 3-2-1. Celtic had a shape. A plan for what happened next. Murty? 7 minutes later, shortly before the Rangers dressing room stopped listening altogether, he finally raised two fingers to his lips to whistle for attention. With a one-man advantage, the interim manager could have pressed a foot down on the bleeding throat of a bitter rival. But there was no grand tactical switch. No plan to get to grips with the introduction of Odsonne Edouard as a Celtic substitute. Only some waving around of the arms. When Rangers needed a vision, an old head, a slither of experience, some cunning and guile, they received the non-verbal equivalent of an under-12s coach standing on the sidelines yelling, "Raise your game, lads!" Murty presided over 29 games, winning 18 and losing 9, two of them to Celtic by margins of 4-0 and 5-0. It was obvious he had to go, and amongst many Rangers fans there is resistance to the idea Murty is somehow a victim in all of this. Yet the club's under-20s coach was only ever doing the directors a favour. Pushed into the spotlight like a reluctant team leader on week 1 of The Apprentice, his thanks came when managing director Stuart Robertson sat behind a table on Tuesday and played the part of Alan Sugar. In a statement confirming Murty's departure, the Ibrox club claimed the former Scotland defender intends to take some time to consider his options. One of those options, it's claimed, includes returning to his role at the Rangers Academy. It's almost impossible to see how that happens. The notion of Murty brewing Steven Gerrard a mug of tea after wishing Lee Wallace a cheery good morning in the Ocean Howe corridor is a stretch when, to quote his Celtic counterpart Rodgers, he has been thrown to the garbage. The former Scotland fullback knew he wouldn't be the permanent manager when his own chairman used a season ticket sales pitch days before the Scottish Cup semi-final with Celtic to promise supporters the best possible appointment capable of delivering immediate success. From that moment, his time was up. Murty has been treated appallingly by the Rangers board, wrote BBC pundit Michael Stewart on Twitter. They gave him the job because he did well enough for them to be able to sell it to the fans without a revolt, and more importantly to buy them time. Now, after many incidents of being undermined, he's gone. Yes, he wasn't the answer long term, but the board have used him as a pawn and discarded him. Unbeaten in his first 2 Old Firm games, the 3-2 defeat at Ibrox to 10-man Celtic in March loosened the wheels. Rangers have played 6 games since then, losing 3-2 to their bitter rivals by an aggregate of 9-0. Murty clearly isn't without blame. Supporters and players came to the conclusion, in the end, he was utterly unsuited to managing Rangers. Yet the architects of another Ibrox shambles are the men who placed him in charge in the first place. By the end of this season, the Ibrox club will have worked their way through 3 managers and 7 different captains. From top to bottom, the absence of leadership is crippling. The board driven by factions unhappy that Dave King remains an absentee landlord and hamstrung by an addiction to gambling. Even Keith Gillespie might consider excessive. Appointing Pedro Caixinha as manager was a risky, high-stakes decision in the first place. Sticking the under-20s coach in charge when Derek McInnes said no to replacing the hapless Portuguese was a season-ending punt. And the determination of King to take yet another gamble on the untried Steven Gerrard has left his fellow directors and shareholders quietly nervous. On the plus side, the potential commercial spin-offs are obvious. Raising the club's profile in the Middle East and Far East markets, where Gerrard's name adorns every third shirt, could be highly lucrative. Players who might otherwise have had no interest in Scottish football will look at Rangers in a new light. Yet Gordon Strachan offered the Liverpool and England legend a warning on what lies ahead when he reflected on his arrival as manager of Celtic after successful spells with Coventry City and Southampton. I was 48, 49 when I joined Celtic, he recalled. I had worked at Premier League clubs with Sir Alex Ferguson and all these kind of people, had done my time, was ready to go again, got the opportunity and thought I could deal with it. 3 weeks in, I thought, oh dear. I've never felt so alone in my life. Murty knew how that felt from the moment he subbed Andy Halliday and Daniel Candeias in the Scottish Cup semi-final and, in the bitter aftermath at Hampden, fell out with Wallace and Kenny Miller. It falls, now, to Jimmy Nicholl and Jonathan Johansson to see Rangers through the final 3 games of the season. To galvanise a flagging, failing dressing room and use those games against Kilmarnock, home, Aberdeen, away, and Hibernian, away, to secure second place in the Premiership. Murty's dismissal was a brutal process in the end. With a £560,000 difference in the prize money between finishing second and fourth in the league, The hope for Rangers is that his end justifies the means.